everyone, and welcome back to Met by Love. We are officially on episode 4 of the podcast, and for this week's episode, I am actually very excited because I recently had a very dear friend suggest a topic, and that topic has to do with Gen Z and Christianity. And this friend asked why Gen Z has decided that God is uncool, or why God is such an uncomfortable topic, or spirituality, and why so little of Gen Z identifies as Christian. And so I'm actually really excited to talk about this. I thought this was interesting because in the Christian world, I've heard from many different places that Gen Z is a new generation that's really on fire for God, and we're believing for a lot of revival, and like it's the first time in a long time that we're seeing such a revolution again for Jesus. And this question made me think a lot, because I thought about how do Gen Z Christians actually portray ourselves, and to start off, I want to start in James 1 22 through 25. And in James 1 22 through 25, it says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself, goes away, and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing." And, reading this passage, it's talking all about not just being a hearer, but also being a doer. And I thought about this generation as Christians. Are we actually living as followers of Christ each and every day, with every interaction that we're in, not just listening to the word, saying we're Christian, and saying we're believing for revival, but you actually have to do something to achieve that. And the thing is, we don't need revival for Christianity. We need revival for Jesus. When we're focused on revival for Christianity, we are focused on influence of the church instead of saintliness. And we should desire for revival of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because this is the only thing that leads to holy living, not the influence of the church. It was very interesting, actually, because I was just at Jesus 24, held by Jesus Image and Pastor Michael Koulianos here in California. And what I saw from Gen Z was beyond what I ever imagined walking in on the first day of the meeting. It was the last day of the meeting, and Pastor Michael was just sharing the gospel, just reading about Jesus' death and resurrection. And I started to weep as I saw hundreds of young people run down to the altar to give their life to Jesus. And it was simply tears of joy for, an exaltation for the King. And I think that it was so powerful to see a room full of, I don't know, probably 6,000 to 7,000 people, jumping, laughing, dancing, tears of joy. And that only comes from true and genuine worship, and genuine surrender of our lives to God. And I thought, man, this is literally a glimpse of heaven. This is what heaven is going to be like. I can't say that it is for sure, but I'm saying, like, all these people simply worshiping God, sitting at the feet of Jesus and exalting him for laying his life down on the cross. The past few days, I really thought about this time that I had at the conference, and I started to think about the questions that my friend had given to me. And I thought, I really started to think about Gen Z Christians, not just Gen Z in general as a whole, but but also specifically Gen Z Christians. And I thought about how a lot of us are reliant on a human to bring us into the presence of God. We experience these moments like this meeting that we had at Jesus Image, these seasons that we're in a place, like I went to YWAM, and we're surrounded simply by followers of God. And, I touched on this before, but I think it is truly a privilege to live among other Christians. It's such a blessing, and I do believe it's a real faith builder. But I was reminded of this word that I read from Martin Luther. And if you don't know who Martin Luther was, he was a part of a religious reforming movement in the 1500s. And in one of his writings, it says, the kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies, and he who will not suffer that does not want to be in the kingdom of Christ. He wants to be among friends, to sit among roses and lilies, not with the bad people, but with the devout people. This really made me think, because I thought about how my whole future, my life has started, but after death, into eternal life, into my new life, is going to be surrounded simply by followers of God. And I thought about how my time on earth is, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, is to reach the lost, reach the hopeless, reach the broken, so that they can also live in eternity surrounded by believers. And I thought to myself, why do we as Gen Z Christians, not even just Gen Z, but Christians, spend so much time focused on the church, or the church is important. I mean, focused on the inwardness of Christian community, rather than fixing our gaze upon Jesus, preparing to be the bride, and preparing others not in the Christian community to be the bride of Christ. And that's all through the message of his death and resurrection, through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I want to say that I do truly value Christian community. I think it's vital for a healthy lifestyle in Jesus. Get involved in the church, serve the church, go to youth group, go to young adults group, But I want to encourage Gen Z Christians, do not let this be your only source. Because if it's your only source, although it's the church, it's still through man. Although it's a young adults group, it's still through man. But when you spend time alone with God, it's through God he speaks, not through man. And again, not to say that it isn't important, because I think it is important to hear different revelations. And also for new believers, it's really important to have that structure and guidance. But as you grow in the faith, don't let that be your source. Let it be a supplement. We need to spend seasons alone instead of, surrounded in community, because these are going to be seasons of growth and learning new things with God, not what someone taught you, but what he taught you. And so that's just my little introduction. But I want to speak on each of the questions that she asked in a little more detail and depth. And so the first question is, why has Gen Z decided that God is uncool? I started to think about this. I thought, you know what, this is actually really hard for me to answer, because at this point in my life, I think God is so cool. And so I was like, oh, what do I even say to this? But I reflected on my past, and yeah, I think I have an idea of what I think is the reason why Gen Z thinks that God is uncool. And I think that has to do with fear of man. And by that I mean that Gen Z is afraid to be known as a follower of God. And I think we seem to be a generation that's solely focused on ourselves and our image, what we carry. And I often used to think this way as well. Like, I have Christian t-shirts, and I always thought, can I wear this in public? Am I going to offend someone? Is someone going to get mad at me if I wear this shirt with a cross that says good news, And I also started to think, like, if I post a Bible verse, what are people from my hometown going to think? Oh, this crazy Jesus girl? And as I reflected on that, I thought, you know what? Like, I am a crazy Jesus girl. And you know why? Is because not one person on this earth, not any man or woman has ever died for me. Not any man or woman has probably even thought of dying for me. But there's one man who did die for me, and that's Jesus Christ. And so why should I be afraid to put it out there when he's the only thing that I take account for? And I think that our generation is very caught up in pride and thinking that it's actually uncool to devote yourself to something and stick with it. But I also want to mention that it can go the opposite way. Not just unbelievers thinking it's uncool to follow Jesus, but I felt so convicted when I started to think about this. That crazy Christian girl myself. My desire is not to be so focused on my Christian image, that I forget that this isn't about me, this is about him. And I think that as Gen Z Christians, many of us want people to see our perfect Christian lifestyle, and we become prideful because we're only looking inwardly. And Pastor Michael at Jesus Image actually said it best when he said, we need to teach who he is, not who I am. And he's right. Like, this life isn't about me and what I portray. This is about what God portrays through me living my life for him. And Pastor Michael actually brought to attention Genesis 3:7. And that says, then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. This passage was right after Adam and Eve ate the fruit. And isn't it so interesting that the first thing Adam and Eve discovered was self, an interest in self. And along with this, speaking on Gen Z Christians, Michael actually said, don't dream about doing something massive for God. Dream about being his bride. And this is really powerful because if we're simply doing something for God, we diminish him and make him less than what he is. Jesus is the wounded king, and he desires a perfectly spotless bride. And he's not something that we make for ourselves. It is him who works through me, not I who work through him. And so, not that I do something for God, but that he does something for his people through me. And so I think, speaking to all of Gen Z, we, Christians and non-Christians, we need to first tear up the root of pride and the enjoyment of ourself, the focus on self, and actually see that, the focus is on God. And I think that will lead to God looking cool, it's not going to be that uncool feeling anymore. And so the second question was, why does so little of Gen Z identify as Christian? And something that my friend who actually asked the question said was, maybe it has something to do with our generation's need for instant gratification. And I thought this was actually a really good point, so I want to speak on my view of that input. And I think that our generation seems to try something for a short time, and when something doesn't work out or something offends them, then they move on to the next thing. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I think that part of this has to do with all of the new age spirituality things like rocks and stones and tarot cards and horoscopes and the list goes on. And looking at all those things, we notice there's a similarity. They're all physical. They're all things that you can touch, you can see, you can read. It's something that you can experience in the natural. And of course, these things are going to give instant gratification because it's right here, it's right in front of me. But I want to share a story from the Bible that actually shows why these things I mentioned a second ago actually don't make a lot of sense. So if we go to 1 Kings 18, we see a man named Elijah. Also, there's people who worship their god, a false god, and the false god is named Baal. And so in 1 Kings 18 through 20 or 18:21, it says, "And Elisha came near to all the people and said, 'How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him.' And the people did not answer him a word." And so Elijah, in this moment, challenges the people of Baal to prepare an offering for their God. And Elijah will also prepare an offering for the true God. And whichever God would send fire from the sky onto the altar would be the true God. So let's think about that for a second. Do you think a statue of a weird looking man will be able to light fire to the altar? Or do you think if there truly is a higher power, which I call God, would be able to light fire to an altar? And I hope that you think, of course, a dead piece of stone can't light fire to an altar, because that's just a little funny. Anyway, let's go on with the story. And so as we go on, the people of Baal say, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. And so they take time and they dance around their altar and they send their worship to their God, and nothing happens. So Elijah starts getting a little funny here in 1 Kings 18:27, and he says, "Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened." So Elijah is basically saying, like, oh, your God isn't doing anything? Is your God asleep? Is your God pooping? And so the people continue to, dance around and shout louder. And they actually start doing like blood rituals and thinking that this rock is going to be able to send fire to the altar. And so still nothing happens. And so Elijah calls all of the people together, and he says this in 1 Kings 18, 36 and 37. "And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, 'O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back.'" And after Elijah reaches out to God one time, instantly fire falls from heaven onto the altar. And, this is crazy, instantaneous. And you may say, like, oh, Cami, that was in the Old Testament, or, oh, Cami, that's in the past. What about now? And my response to this is that in my life, no physical thing that I've experienced has ever changed me, helped me, sought me out more than God. And, you can say, like, well, Cami, how do you experience God? And I think that we make it so complicated. We do not have to strive for God to work. It's so simple to just say, Lord, I need you. I want to see you. Show up in my life. And he's going to show up faithful. I would say, like, your little rock or your paragraph that you read of that's going to tell you what your month looks like or who you're going to fall in love with, is not going to change the course of your life. But I know a guy that can change your life, and he's waiting for you to answer the call. And so I encourage Gen Z, I guess, or actually, everyone not to get so caught up in, I said it once and I didn't receive anything. And wait on the Lord, because he's going to show himself faithful to answer. And so the last question I'm going to touch on is why Gen Z has decided that God is an uncomfortable topic. And what I think this has to do with is the hurt that's in the world today. And I think we often think that God is so, God cares about some people, but doesn't care about others. And we've actually created that mindset. So we've created a world of separation. If you believe in this, I don't like you. But if you believe in this, yeah, I like you. But, but you don't believe that way? Okay, no, I don't like you. And I think this whole situation that I thought about was the war with Palestine and Israel. And I think that it pains God to see that this war is also causing separation in different countries and different nations. And I think we have to realize that we don't have to hate someone because they believe something different than us. It's become so uncomfortable for people to say, I believe in Jesus Christ, because they're afraid that it has a negative connotation to it. To say I'm a Christian has a negative connotation to it. And I don't think we should be afraid to stand for the one thing that is most accepting, the one thing that can rid us of separation, Jesus Christ. Because do you know that Jesus didn't just die for me? Jesus died for you. Jesus died for the Palestinians. Jesus died for the Israelites. Jesus died for the Mormons, the Catholics, the Christians. Jesus died for the murderer in jail. He doesn't pick and choose who he loves. He loves everyone. And so as a part of Gen Z, we need to stop carrying hearts of hate and start carrying hearts of love. Christ died and was raised again on the third day so that we may all have a chance to know him. So we need to stop making God an uncomfortable topic and making him a topic of conversation, because that's what's going to change this world. And so with all that being said, my heart is that you realize God is not something to be afraid of. It's okay to have questions and concerns, but he's going to meet you with love, the same as he did for me. And all you have to do is ask him to reveal himself. Read his words, spend time with him like you would a friend, and don't be afraid of the one thing that can change your life for the better. Faith is really a leap, and we cannot use logic to fully justify belief. And there's a lot more to gain from him being real than him being not. A life of joy, a life of fullness, instead of living in a life of wondering. And so if I can leave you with something today, it would be to genuinely seek the Lord, get in his word, and get alone with God so that he can reveal his character directly to you, not through man, but to you directly. And to my dear friend who asked these questions, I'm so grateful that you brought this to my attention, because I think it's a really important topic to talk about. And so I hope that I answered all these questions and giving me the chance to talk about this. So I just thank you all for listening to episode 4 of Met by Love. And if you have any further questions, of course, ask the Lord. But also you can reach out to me, because I would love to hear from you. Just reach out on my social media. And so I'm really excited for episode 5 coming out hopefully next week. So I'll see you all soon. Bye, guys.